I stood motionless on my front lawn, stunned, as droplets of bleach slid down the lapels of my brand-new charcoal suit. The fabric, something I had scrimped and saved months to afford, was already ruined. White blotches spreading across the dark material like an acid burn. The sharp, chemical smell clung to me, stinging my nose. Across the yard, Karen Westfield, our HOA president, stormed off with 2 empty bottles still clutched in her hands like trophies. Her face was twisted with fury, veins standing out along her neck. "This is Wall Street. You're not better than us," she screamed, her voice cutting through quiet cul-de-sac. Behind drawn curtains, blinds shifted. Neighbors were watching, too frightened, or perhaps too cautious, to intervene, but very much witnesses to the spectacle. My mind reeled. I'd spent years building my business from nothing, grinding through sleepless nights and 80-hour weeks to finally get to this point. I'd made it, finally bought a house in a nice neighborhood, finally had the stability I had dreamed of, and now here I was, assaulted in broad daylight on my own property, because of how I dressed. It had been just 3 months since I moved into Lakeside Estates. At first glance, it seemed like the perfect place to settle down. Trimmed lawns, freshly painted fences, friendly handshakes, and a location close enough to the city for my meetings downtown. My tech consultancy was finally taking off, and this house was a symbol of everything I had sacrificed for. But what I hadn't counted on was Karen Westfield. From the very beginning, she had seemed fixated on me. Every morning, I noticed her sitting stiffly on her porch across the street, watching me leave for work. I always dress in sharp, professional suits, tailored jackets, polished shoes, silk ties. My clients, executives, and investors expected professionalism, and I prided myself on living up to that standard. About 2 weeks in, Karen made her first move. She caught me at the mailbox one evening, her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know, most people around here dress casually," she said, her tone sweet and sharp at once. "All those fancy suits make it seem like you think you're better than everyone else." I had laughed politely, brushing it off. I explained that my business required professional appearance. "I work with CEOs and investors all day." I told her, "It's just part of the job." But as I spoke, I saw something harden in her expression. My explanation hadn't eased her suspicion. It had deepened it. From there, the harassment escalated. First came the snide remarks. Then, a neighborhood dress code policy appeared in my mailbox, warning that I was in violation. When I checked the bylaws, no such policy existed. Next came anonymous complaint letters, complaining about my elitist appearance and the negative effect I was having on the neighborhood's character. I knew exactly who had written them. Then Karen moved on to weaponizing her authority. She began scheduling surprise property inspections, conveniently timed for when I was heading out the door. She invented violations that bordered on the absurd. My grass was half an inch too tall. My mailbox wasn't standard. My trash cans had been visible for 15 minutes too long after collection. Each infraction came a fine, which I disputed and won at HOA meetings. Every victory seemed to inflame her more. Through it all, I tried to remain civil. My parents had raised me to take the high road, and I wasn't about to sink to her level. A few neighbors quietly warned me about her, about how she had ruled the HOA with an iron fist ever since becoming president. Her husband was a wealthy local businessman, and she wasn't shy about threatening lawsuits against anyone who resisted her authority. But things came to a head last Tuesday. She intercepted me in my driveway, standing so close I could smell the sharp tang of her perfume. Her eyes were wild with anger. "I'm sick of you parading around here like you own the place," she hissed. "Nobody needs to wear 3-piece suits in a residential neighborhood. Stop showing off." I kept my composure. "Karen, how I dress for work isn't covered by HOA regulations. Those rules are about property maintenance, not clothing choices." She said nothing more, but the look she gave me as she turned away chilled me. It was a look that promised escalation. Today was supposed to be one of the most important days of my career. I had a presentation with potential investors, people who could help take my business national. I'd spent weeks preparing. I even treated myself to a brand new navy suit, the sharpest one I owned. That morning, I stepped outside with my briefcase in hand, feeling confident and ready. But I didn't make it to my car. You just don't listen, do you? The venom in Karen's voice froze me in place. I turned. She was standing just feet away, trembling with rage, clutching a plastic bottle. Before I could register what was happening, Karen stepped forward, and before I could react, she began spraying liquid directly onto my chest and arms. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, stumbling backward as the acrid stench of bleach filled my nose and burned my throat. She didn't stop. Her hand worked the spray nozzle furiously, her eyes wild with rage. "Stop dressing like a CEO," she shrieked. "This is a middle-class neighborhood, not some trashy runway for your elitist vibes." I tried to shield myself, but it was too late. The damage was already done. The brand-new navy fabric, the $1,000 suit I had bought for this critical meeting, was ruined. White blotches were blooming across the jacket and sleeves, spreading like a disease. By the time the bottle was empty, she hurled it aside and stormed off without another word, shoulders squared in self-righteous triumph. For a moment, I just stood there in disbelief, staring down at my destroyed suit. Months of work had gone into preparing for this meeting, years of grinding to reach this point in my career, and now everything was jeopardized by one woman's obsessive hatred. That's when I noticed movement to my right. My neighbor, Mr. Chun, stood frozen in his driveway, his mouth slightly open. Then he raised a hand, pointing toward his doorbell camera. "I got all of that," he said firmly. "Every second. She's gone too far this time." Something in me shifted right then. I had been patient. I had been professional. I had let Karen's harassment roll off my back for months. But this crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I pulled out my phone, took photos of the suit, and called the police. While I waited, Mr. Chin quickly downloaded the footage and sent it to me. The video was crisp, undeniable, an unprovoked attack caught in high definition. To my surprise, 3 other neighbors soon approached. Each of them offered to give statements about Karen's long-running campaign of harassment. I learned that I wasn't her first target. She had gone after anyone who didn't fit her rigid, narrow vision of a neighborhood. Most people simply kept their heads down, but none had ever endured something this extreme. I called my investors, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. I explained the situation briefly and promised to reschedule. To my relief, they didn't just understand, they sympathized, even asked to see the photo of what had happened. One of them replied, "We've dealt with difficult people too. Don't worry, we'll meet next week." Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived. They took my statement, reviewed the footage, and wasted no time crossing the street to Karen's home. From my driveway, I could see her through the window, gesticulating wildly, pointing in my direction, her face flushed with indignation. When the officers returned, they shook their heads. "She claims it was a misunderstanding," one of them said, "that she was helping you remove a stain." I handed over my phone with the video queued up. "Does that look like helping?" The officer watched for less than 30 seconds before nodding grimly. "Would you like to press charges?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Assault, harassment, destruction of property. All of it." Minutes later, the officers returned to Karen's house. This time, they came out with her in handcuffs. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as she was guided toward the waiting squad car. Her face was a mask of disbelief, eyes darting from house to house, as if begging for someone to step forward in her defense. But nobody did. Some neighbors stood on their lawns, arms crossed, relief written plainly across their faces. Others simply watched in silence. For the first time, Karen Westfield was powerless. 3 weeks later, I sat in the back of the courtroom during her hearing. The charges, assault, malicious destruction of property, and harassment, were read aloud. Karen's lawyer tried to paint it as a lapse in judgment, a misunderstanding, but the judge was unmoved. The security footage spoke louder than any excuses. Karen was sentenced to 6 months of probation. She was ordered to pay $1,500 in restitution for the destroyed suit and to complete 100 hours of community service. Most importantly, the court issued a restraining order. She could not come within 50 feet of me or my property. The HOA board convened that same week and, without hesitation, voted to strip her of her title as president. Years of petty power had come to an end in a single, unanimous decision. I was there when the verdict was read. I watched her face crumple as reality set in. Still, she tried to cling to her delusion of authority. "But I was protecting our neighborhood values," she protested desperately as the bailiff guided her away. For someone who had built her life around intimidation and control, the shock of actual consequences was something she clearly couldn't process. And for the first time since moving into Lakeside Estates, I felt like I truly belonged in my own neighborhood.